Okay. This is, yeah, I'm in the car because I gotta multitask, right? We're at Raleigh looking for azaleas, which seem to be almost impossible to find, which is ridiculous. So on the way back, I thought I'll go ahead and do chapter 2, because why not? It's a long ride. So yes, I'm in the car, but no, I'm not driving. So my husband's driving, but he's been instructed to keep quiet. So we're going to go over chapter 2, and it might be kind of difficult sometimes because some of these things are diagrams, and it's I guess I can show you like that maybe, because I'm using another phone for the chapter 2 study questions because I don't have them printed out in front of me. So we'll do our best. But chapter 2 is all about the brain, which is totally different than chapter 1. Chapter 1 we had all kinds of topics, but 2 is focused completely on biology, that biological theory that we mentioned in chapter 1. But we're not going to cover all of chapter 2, of course. We just pick and choose some of the stuff to cover. So what we talk about and what's on the study guide is all you need to know. You do not need to know stuff in your book that's not in the study guide. All right. You'll see question number 1 probably gave you some fits to answer because it has a fill-in-the-blank diagram, but no way to get in there and actually type inside of it. So students have found some pretty creative ways to get the answers in for the diagram. So the diagram is just showing a chart of the nervous system. The nervous system is the information highway for our body. It's how our body communicates, how the brain communicates with the rest of our body, and how it sends eyeballs, ears, skin send messages to the brain. And the brain is also included in the nervous system. So of course psychologists are interested in this. So we're going to look at this chart, and this is all we have to know about the nervous system. Then we get into the brain. The rest of the time we spend in the brain. So the chart, you can see it right here. The top of it is called nervous system. And then underneath we have 2 different branches overall of the nervous system. We have the central nervous system, and that's the one that doesn't branch off anymore. The central. And the central nervous system is the brain and spinal cord. And I think of central like if we folded ourselves over like a paper doll, you know, our hands and legs, and just fold us down the middle, it's in the center of our body. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord, right in the center. So if it's not the brain or the spinal cord, it's the other one. And the other one right there is broken down into more levels. So the other one is called the peripheral nervous system, which is like your peripheral vision. It's all on the sides of the central. So it's everything else, really. So that's just easy to remember. It's everything else. I hope I don't get car sick. I just thought about that. Looking down in a car is not good. So I'll probably have to look up every now and then trying to keep myself from being sick. The peripheral system is bigger than the central system, so that is why it's broken down again into the next level. The next level is the somatic, right here. The somatic is not broken down again, okay? Somatic. Oops, got dark. Okay. Somatic is right here, that third level, without the drop-down arrows. Somatic, and then the other one is autonomic. Now I think of the autonomic one when I'm trying to remember them because they're opposites of each other. Just like the central and peripheral, kind of like opposites. The autonomic and the somatic, definitely opposites. The autonomic, which has the arrows under it, is controls non-voluntary muscles and glands. So the things that you don't have control over. But what's another word for involuntary that sounds an awful lot like the autonomic? The automatic. So I think of autonomic nervous system controlling the automatic processes in our body. So the things that we aren't aware of, that we don't have to pay attention to, like our heart beating and digestion and the immune system and all these other things. So it's the autonomic, automatic, non-voluntary muscles and glands. The other one, got dark again. Oops. Oh no, now I've lost it because I don't know where to find downloads on this thing. So let me try this. Oh, okay, good. The other one, the somatic, that doesn't have any drop down arrows, that controls voluntary muscles. No glands. There's no gland where you can sit here and think, work. No, just muscles that are voluntary. So like walking, moving my hand about right now, that kind of thing. So which one's bigger, the autonomic or the somatic? The things going on in your body that you don't have control over, or the muscles that you do have control over? Yep, autonomic. So it's broken down again into two layers. One is the sympathetic and the other is the parasympathetic. I remember the sympathetic because it's stimulating. S's, starts with S. The sympathetic nervous system gets you excited. It gets your body ready for action. That can be because of anger, because of fear, because of happiness, sexual arousal. It doesn't matter. It's all the same to your body. A Mack truck pulling out in front of you and you talking to someone you think is attractive. Same body system's working. Makes your heart beat faster, makes you sweat, makes you breathe faster, makes your muscles tense. Same thing when you're angry or scared or whatever. Any kind of arousal, psychologists use that word to not always mean sexual, by the way. Any kind of arousal is caused by a sympathetic system being activated. Sympathetic stimulating. The opposite one, the one on the other side, oops, is the parasympathetic. So it's the opposite. It calms you down. So after you get that test grade back and you like what it says, the parasympathetic is working. It's calming you down. Okay, one or the other is active. So that's the nervous system, little diagram that we had here. And that answers question number 2 also, because it's asking what do each of these systems do. So we've already answered that. Yay. So now we're on question 3. Okay, now we're talking about the brain. And that's where we're going to focus the rest of the chapters, on the brain. We'll first talk about the parts of the brain, then we talk about how these cells work. I think it's opposite in your book. Your book does how it works and then the parts. So the order might be a little different. Question number 3, why is the brain stem so important? It's also called the hindbrain. Oh, that's something else about biology in the brain. There's several different names for the same thing. It can be frustrating. Anyway, when they come up, I'll tell you all the names, but you just need to know the one the book uses, because that's what your test will use, right? Why is the brainstem so important? It keeps you alive. Okay, it's responsible. There's some books say 3 parts, some books say 4 parts. We use 4. There's 4 parts of the brainstem, and each one of those parts have a life-sustaining function. So if you've got damage to the brainstem, yowza, not good. Question number 4. What parts of the brain make up the brainstem? So, and what do each one do? Okay? The first part, I'm gonna, if I don't already have in Moodle, I don't have a chart here. I could probably have pulled one up so I can show it to you. But I know that in your textbook there's a picture of the brain and all its parts. So, and you don't have the diagram on the test. You just need to know what each brain part is responsible for. And you know it will give it to you as an example. It'll say, John was in a car accident and had damage to his occipital lobe. What can he not do now? Okay, so that's how the questions will be for this information. So it's not going to ask you a diagram, but you need to know what they do. Parts of the brainstem. First one I'm talking about is the medulla. It's technically the medulla oblongata, but sometimes we just shorten it to medulla. And it's responsible for reflexes like coughing and sneezing, digestion, breathing, blood pressure. Obviously, those things are really important for life, okay? Now, let's do a note here, talking about the brain. I am giving you some highlights. These brain parts do other jobs too. And there are other brain parts that do similar jobs, okay? And they work together. I am just giving you highlights. This is not an exhaustive review of the brain. Also, it's interesting to note how we know what this part does. How do we find that out? We find out how the brain works through accidents that happen to people, because we can't make things happen. We can't damage parts of your brain on purpose just to see what will happen in a human. But sometimes people have injuries, strokes, and they lose an ability, and we go, that part of the brain must affect that function. We have learned through different kinds of imaging technology, but that's been new and recent. And we also learned through dissecting brains after people have died. So we don't know everything there is to know about the brain, and what we do know has been more recent and is ever changing. So I'm just giving you a couple highlights, not an exhaustive review, and who knows, by the time your kids take classes, they'll have completely different information. Okay? Alright. So talk about the medulla. Then we have the pons, P-O-N-S, and it's involved in arousal, sleep-wake cycle, kind of important things, being able to wake up, go to sleep. Next, we want to talk about the cerebellum, and the cerebellum often gets left off. That's the fourth thing that sometimes is on the list, sometimes is not. Cerebellum is very sensitive to damage, most sensitive part of the brain. A little bit of damage here, and we're going to be able to see it. What does it do? It does coordination of your muscles. So if you can't dance, blame your cerebellum. It works on smooth movements of your tongue, allowing me to speak. And it works on balance. So you can imagine, if you have damage here, how you're going to appear. You're probably going to look intoxicated. You're going to be unsteady. You're going to be uncoordinated. You're going to slur your speech. I had a student once who had several strokes in her cerebellum, and she told us what it was like, the tricks that she used, so that most people didn't know she had these problems, but she did. When she would walk in a hallway, for example, in school, she would run her finger along the wall, and if her finger came off that wall, she would know she's headed in a diagonal pattern, because she would walk right into people and not realize it. She'd walk crooked. I mean, one of the things the cops have you do, right, for a DUI, walk a straight line. If you're intoxicated, you can't walk a straight line very well. She couldn't walk a straight line. She said she had to relearn speech, and her speech was very deliberate, but some people just talk that way, so I didn't think anything of it. When she got up from her seat, she'd have to put her hand on her desk and steady herself before she could walk. So it was these kind of things that we didn't really notice until she said it, and then you could see what she had to do. So it's a very sensitive part of the brain. Then we have the fourth and last part, and that's the midbrain, named for being right in the middle of the brain. And we have pain and some hearing, some sight registered here. Alright, so that's the brainstem. I gotta pull my chart back up again, my notes. That was question number 4. Question number 5. What is the limbic system? Several parts of the brain work together to produce functions, especially psychological functions, more sophisticated things than like walking, although that has multiple parts too. When they work together, we often call it a system. Limbic system deals with emotions. It's our emotional motherboard, like a computer. It is responsible for feeling emotions and controlling emotions. It's also responsible for drives and motives that make us do what we do. So we really like the limbic system in psychology. We're all over the limbic system. So that's what it does. It's number 5. Number 6, what parts of the brain are in the limbic system? Again, we got a list of them. We're not going to give all of them. We're just going to give some of the ones that we're really like. So we have the thalamus, and it's like a relay station. It sends information to different parts of your brain that process that information. I think of it like a post office, how it used to work maybe. Someone sitting inside the post office mail was coming in from all different places, just like you have visual stimuli, auditory stimuli, olfactory stimuli, gustatory stimuli, tactile stimuli. Then you got messages coming in from your body, from all these different organs and stuff. It has to read all that information and then shoot it to the part of the brain that translates that information. The post office worker has to get all this mail from different sources, read all the different handwriting, and then put it in the correct slots. So I think of it the same way. Thalamus. Next one is hypothalamus. It sits below. We really, really, really like the hypothalamus because we think it's involved in motives and drives, causing us to do what we do. So the four main drives that we think of are feeding. They all start with an F, okay, just to make it easy. It's just a little trick to make it easy for you. Feeding. How's our gas? Okay. We don't say I've got to go feed. We say I have to go eat. So appetite. But it does start with an F. So we have a theme here. So feeding, eating, appetite seems to be managed by the hypothalamus. Obviously other things involved, but definitely the hypothalamus. We go in and we destroy the hypothalamus on a rat and he starves to death. We stimulate the hypothalamus with some electricity and make it work. He eats and eats and eats and eats until he can't even stand. So, feeding. The next F, fleeing. I know that's kind of weird, but it's a theme, F, right? Fleeing, fear, that's F. But we've got another theme going of not just F, but ing. So we don't fearing. So fear. We have a third F. So we got feeding, fleeing, fighting. Aggression, anger. That's the hypothalamus too. You can see why psychologists are interested in all this. Then we have the fourth F, sex. Yes, the 4 Fs. This is how we talk about it. It's just easier to remember the 4 Fs, sex. Okay? Sex drive is involved with the hypothalamus, for sure. We find, not surprisingly, that men have a bigger hypothalamus than women. And we thought maybe it was implicated in sexual orientation. So we tested the hypothalamus on heterosexual and homosexual people and found, nope, no difference in size. So it has nothing to do with it. So it's about sex drive, not orientation, not who it's for. So feeding, fleeing, fighting, and sex, the 4 Fs. See why we like it? So one was the thalamus, 2 is the hypothalamus. We're talking about the limbic system. Third part is the amygdala. It looks like Amy G. Dalla in its spelling, amygdala. We like the amygdala because it's involved in fear, rage, some pleasure also. Interesting how they're closely involved. If you stimulate the amygdala on a cat, it will rear up its back and hiss, even though nothing is around. There's nothing there. We just stimulate that brain part. It's called a sham rage because it's fake. It's a sham. It's a trick. Thalamus, hypothalamus, amygdala. Then we have the hippocampus. Hippo, like the animal. Campus, like college campus, which may never see again. Hippocampus involved in memory formation. Isn't it interesting that your memories, the part that helps form a memory, is so tightly connected to the emotional part of your brain? Yep. Turns out, if something is emotional, it elicits an emotion out of you, you have an easier time remembering it. It becomes part of that memory system. Think about last Christmas, your last birthday, your first kiss. These kinds of experiences you did not need to create flashcards for. You did not need to rewrite over and over again, make up a rhyme or a jingle to help you remember them. It just happened. You just remembered them. The reason is because it was emotional. That's why school is so hard, because school's not emotional. The information we're learning is not going to touch you emotionally. So it's harder to learn. So just remember that. Now, if the emotion you're experiencing is too strong, it actually impedes the memory formation. So if someone has a gun to your head, or you're a witness of a crime or involved in a crime, a lot of times you will not be able to remember some parts of it because there was too much emotion involved. So a little bit good for memory. Too much, bad for memory. Thalamus, hypothalamus, amygdala, hippocampus. Those are the ones we're going to talk about. Now there is the olfactory bulb, and I like to bring it up because you can think of examples of this in your life. The olfactory bulb translates olfactory information, smells. And aren't smells connected to memory and emotions? Yes. You smell your husband's cologne and you have an emotional response. It may be connected to a certain experience that you had together. Florida. So their brain is the smell and memory and emotions are all very well connected. They all go together. We don't need gas. We don't start gas. All right. I'm always paranoid about gas. So those are the parts of the limbic system. There's another part, but we'll get to it later. Okay? Then we'll go back. So leave space in your notes for that other part. All right, that was number 5. Number 6. What parts of the brain are included in the limbic system? Ha ha ha. We just answered that. And their functions. Good. We just did 6. Number 7. What is the cortex? So we were in the inside of the brain. Now we're going to that big curly wrinkled mass on the outside. That's what you mostly see if you just suck the brain out of somebody's head. That wrinkled curly stuff has a bunch of different names. Your book calls it the cortex. That's what we'll call it. Cerebrum, cerebral cortex. It's also called that. Cerebral hemispheres. But your book calls it the cortex, so we'll call it the cortex. It just makes up the majority of your brain. Okay? Really, though, if we took it out of your head, it's a thin sheet, like poster board. 2 to 3 square feet big. But that's not the shape of our head. Our head is round, so we have this poster board in our round, small head. So how do we get in there? We wrinkle it up. It's just like, I usually have a piece of paper, but I don't. You take that paper to get it into a round space, you have to wrinkle it up. So that's why it's wrinkled, because to allow more surface area. Surface area is the part of something that touches air. So this is very thin layer. It has multiple layers in it. It's very thin, and so it's like a sheet crunched up in our round head. So that's number 8. Why is it wrinkled? Number 9. All right. Now this curly wrinkled mass, this cortex, is naturally made into 2 parts. Okay, they don't touch. They sit right beside each other. We have 2 parts of this cortex. We call them hemispheres. Luckily, we just call the right hemisphere right and the left hemisphere left. Yay. Okay, this is my right, this is my left. I don't know. Looks like it's the same on the video. So the right hemisphere is on the right, left on the left. We think that the hemispheres seem to have some specialties. Can you hear that rain? It looks raining. Can we just have a crappier day? We drove an hour to Raleigh to get 4 plants that we could have found right down the road. Ugh, so bad. All right. So the right, they have specialties. We think the right side does things like music, fantasy, emotions, facial recognition, some language. So it is, I think of it as relaxing stuff. Like I think art and music and fantasy and creativity is relaxing. So right, relaxing. The left side is, I think, logical. Math, science, some language. The left brain, logical kinds of things. Also, the left side, the left hemisphere controls the right side of your body. So my left hemisphere is lighting up right now. And the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. I don't understand why. I've never been able to see any book or any professor tell me why that is. Like, what's the reason behind it? It just is what it is. Do you know? No, he doesn't know either. He's got a chemistry degree, but he's had a lot of biology and stuff, so I thought maybe he might know. Alrighty. So that was number 9. Number 10, okay, the lobes. There's another way that this wrinkled stuff is divided. That's an obvious division that you can see. It's a nature-made, God-made division, okay? This other division we have learned from all those accidents and testing. That's my gum, because I didn't want to lose it. And I didn't want it to be chomping on it. So we've got them divided into what they call lobes, L-O-B-E-S. And you can't see that. If I sucked your brain out of your head, you couldn't see this division at all. And in your book, it's color-coded with pink and purple and yellow and green to show you where the lines are, but it's not easy to see. We do think that these lobes have special functions also, because people have had damage to them and they lost that ability. Now, let me say something about that, though. We also have learned that even though the right side may have some preferred tasks, if it is damaged, we can sometimes continue to do that task because the left side can do it too. But the left side's not very good at it, for example. The right side does it really well. So if you need to do it, the right side is going to do it. But if the right side is gone, sometimes the left side can do it too. It may need practice. Like, think of someone who had a stroke. They learned to reuse their hand. It's not those brain cells coming back that were damaged. They've just getting other brain cells to do the job. So I just want to make sure we understand that too. It's kind of neat. Anyway, these lobes in our head, they have specialties. The front lobe, luckily, it's called frontal. It's in the front. That's nice. That is the biggest one. And we as humans have the biggest one of all animals. We think of that as the human lobe. It's the part that makes us human, which I think was another question on here. It is number 11. What lobe makes us human? The frontal lobe. Because it does things like decision making, judgment, reasoning, self-control, planning ahead. And we think that we're the only animals that can do that kind of stuff. And that, my friends, if you go back up to question number 6, about the limbic system. That is another part of the limbic system, the frontal lobe. We need that frontal lobe control in with all those emotions. If we didn't have a frontal lobe to go, not a good timing to yell at your teacher or your boss or whatever, then we would just act out on our emotions. So the frontal lobe is connected in with all those emotions too, and it gives us some control. Teenagers, littler kids don't have that frontal lobe connected to the limbic system very well. That happens with development. It happens during adolescence, but it takes a while. So teenagers will sometimes seem to be acting with a frontal lobe connected to the rest of their limbic system and make decisions that have some logic and reasoning. Sometimes they seem to act out on emotions because it's not all of a sudden process. So, all right, that's the frontal lobe. We have the parietal lobe on top, kind of your crown area. The parietal lobe does body position awareness. You really see that in sports. You're holding that baseball bat. You're not necessarily looking at that bat, but you can tell if your hands are in the right position by how it feels. If you're running a track and you're jumping over a hurdle, you can tell if your foot gets high enough to clear it. It's about knowing where your body is in space. And it's also about touch. That parietal lobe interprets information about touch, how things feel, temperature, tactile information. So it interprets that information. We have the very back, can't see it here, occipital lobe. And if things are ocular, they do with vision. Get close on our gas. So it makes no sense that it's clear in the back of our head when our eyeballs are in the front. What the heck? But vision. Some speech, some hearing, but vision, vision, vision. Then we have the temporal lobes on the side, near your temple, and it's hearing, speech, some vision, but mainly hearing and speech is what it's known for. All right. Woo! Look, this video is 30 minutes. I'm going to, let me finish 12. What part of the brain connects the two hemispheres of the cortex? That's the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum connects. See all those C's? The cerebral hemispheres. A bunch of C's. Maybe that'll help. Okay, I'm gonna do a new video for the neuron because it had a hard time uploading this much video last time. So I'm gonna stop it here and do the neuron.